Yo, what's good, guys? Welcome to the first ever podcast. Today, I have one of my closest friends. We have Devin, Austin, and Jose. In today's podcast, we're going to talk about the salary cap of the NBA. So, with the NBA currently in their 76th season, we've seen the league come so far from seeing plumbers and firefighters to now witnessing players break ankles and make shots that almost seem impossible. With the salary cap having no intentions to decrease and younger players getting bigger and just impressive contracts, two questions arise. Do these players deserve it? What are you risking? And can money really buy you a championship? Um, this year's NBA salary cap is increasing to about 176 million per team. Now we see this every year. It just seems like it doesn't stop, right? This gives a lot of teams leeway to certain things to signing their all-star players. What are your guys' opinion on these players like Stephen Curry, Jason Tatum, Tyler Hero, uh, etc., getting these big contracts? What do you guys think are the risks and the trade-offs of signing these players? Devin, what do you think?
Man, there's so many things you could talk about on this topic, but I think I'll try and keep it central to my favorite team, the Miami Heat, and my favorite player, Tyler Hero, because he actually just signed a new contract this most recent offseason. He signed a 4 year, $130 million contract. Now, as a Miami Heat fan and a Tyler Hero fan as well, I think it's well deserved because he's young. He just won the Sixth Man of the Year award. So having NBA hardware in your portfolio at that young of an age, something very impressive. And on top of that, I think he's one of like two or three players to ever average 20 points coming off the bench. So, as a supporter of my favorite team and of Tyler Hero, I think the contract is well deserved. But there's also a lot of risks that we take with that extending into that contract. One of those risks that we're taking, we put a no trade clause on the contract, meaning if for some reason he doesn't pan out and we want to trade him somewhere, he has the option to say, no, I don't want to go to this team. So that's just one thing that we're risking. We're also risking like there is a in what's the word I'm looking for? There is a chance, there is a possibility that he's a 1 year wonder. There's a possibility that he can't stay healthy. There's a lot of factors to take into account giving a young player. I think Tyler Hero is only 22, maybe 23 years old at this age. He still has a lot that I think he needs to prove as a starter in the NBA. But overall, I think being able to sign him to this contract at a young age and get him locked in for the next 4 years of what will likely be his prime in the NBA, I think it's a good move for the Miami Heat. But that's just one player example. So I'd love to hear what somebody else has to say on maybe like an older player or anything like that.
Also, what do you think about
Um, I was gonna talk about the older player, probably going with LeBron signing the 2 year contract like we were talking about. And I don't know, personally, when I look at like contracts like that, I look at more the risk side of it, just looking
Mm-hmm.
for that kind of mindset. And especially when I understand like looking at a younger player and giving them that kind of contract, especially that's how the league is nowadays. Not something that I
Mm-hmm.
necessarily agree on fully, but it's just how the role the with the inflation. But when you're talking about an older player like a LeBron or somebody around his time in the NBA, especially how he's playing now with the amount of injuries he's having, like paying the amount of money that they are for him as for 2 years, in my opinion, is a huge risk. Granted, like when he's good, but especially with the old age, like injuries are just something you simply can't just brush off anymore, especially coming into 37 and after this going to be 39 or 40, like we were talking about. Um, personally, I think the salary that comes with the contracts and having those players is a little too high. Maybe that's something that will change or maybe it'll continue growing. But especially with older players, I could see it being kind of an issue, especially with injuries and not fulfilling up to the potential that they're supposed to have when making these contracts.
May I say one thing before we go to Jose? I actually got it wrong. It's a 123 million. I'm not sure what I said. I think I said 126 or something like that. But it's 123 this year. All right, Jose. What is your opinion on these players getting such big contracts?
Devin really hit it all with what he was saying. Austin gave a little of the pinpoints, which filled in what was, or at least what I thought was missing. But going off what they said, you got to be careful because you don't want to give a big contract to someone so young, because then they're going to think that they're going to constantly get that. Then next thing you know, they go to another team and it's a at the beginning it's that offer, but then with their next contract it's lower, or the incentives that they might have or goals are not as big, and you just got to be careful with that. With bigger stars like LeBron James and Tatum, I understand getting a bigger contract, bigger check, because they've been there for so long that there's not really goals to, you know. But yeah, that's my idea on it.
Just like Jose hit, we're not going to talk about incentives because not only contract is about, here's money, perform. Uh, some older players who are experienced need kind of a motivation, a push to do well sometimes. And that's where incentives come along. One prime example is Jason Tatum. After signing his 5-year extension, one major incentive was that he was supposed to hit an all NBA criteria, so making it to the top 5 all NBA. And that would increase his 163 million guaranteed to around 195. This is a crazy amount to think about it. But as a Celtics fan, after hearing that, at first I was like, okay, like get your bag. But in that same first year, he played a lot of greedy ball. He was trying to get his numbers up so he could hit that. And personally, for me, if you're just thinking about yourself at that point, um, you're just not helping the team. You're not wanting to really win. You want to win for yourself. That's how I see it. Devin, what is your opinion on players having incentives?
Oh, I love it. I'm all for incentives on contracts. I think um everybody loves to have like little things that they can do to just like get their minds in the right place, help them work towards like certain specific goals that are like. And because the thing with incentives, like you can get as specific as you want, or you can get as broad with it. I've seen incentives for injury-prone players to hit a certain number of games played in a season. I've seen on like the funner side of examples. Like last season, Spencer Dinwiddie, the guard for now the Dallas Mavericks, had an incentive that if his team, the Washington Wizards at the time, made the NBA Finals, he would get an extra dollar on his contract. Like not 100, not 1,000. They put it down in the contract. Yeah, we'll give you an extra dollar if we make the finals. Like so with incentives, it's some fun for the team, and it also gives like certain players like specific goals tailored to them to really like show that they deserve the contract.
What about you, Austin? What is your opinion on incentives in today's NBA?
I think it's kind of like a fine line between if it can be a good or bad kind of thing. The point I didn't think about until Devin brought up was the fun side of it. I kind of like that now thinking about it, just like having those fun incentives to, I think it kind of like revitalizes the league in a sense, making it kind of more lighthearted than fun. Not saying that they shouldn't try as hard, but still cool to see those fun ones. But if we're looking at the more serious ones, especially with the younger players, who haven't been in the league for that long, personally, this the side I take on it is there more of a negative impact. Um, for me, I'm looking at the greed side of it, or a lot of players are going to try and manipulate these incentives to try to get extra money, and I just feel like,
It's a good point.
yeah, looking at the longevity of incentives and especially future players who aren't yet in the league and plan on getting there one day, what kind of impact is this going to have on them? Especially looking at incentives that are crazy high in cash value, like how much they're going to get out of it for little things like staying in an extra minute and fouling out just for an extra grand. Like, how is that going to impact future players in the league? Like, how is that going to make the league in the future? If you see one player doing it and he's doing really well, everybody else is going to want to follow. It's just about what's the new trend. So I guess my fear is like if this trend starts to set where these players try to take advantage of these incentives, like what kind of impact is this going to put on new players? So I guess it's the thought process I have on it is it's a more negative thing.
So not only is that, but there's also some incentives where, like, kind of like you said with Spencer Dinwiddie, if they win the championship,
Mm-hmm.
that's, and a championship is what every team is looking for, especially for right now, where a lot of rookies, that were rookies 4 or 5 years ago are now in their prime. And a lot of teams now are looking as a situation of no longer waiting. Like, okay, we'll give this player a couple more years to develop, and then we'll think about a championship. Now they're at that position where it's a win now mentality for a lot of teams,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when it comes to their star player, to keep them there, they want to have role players or a co-star, or
Yep.
and this brings the topic of super teams. A lot of teams bring in super teams or super duos, sometimes like dynamic duos. Uh, so then, with the salary cap increasing, meaning that essentially you can have 2 to 3 all stars on one whole team. Do you
Mm-hmm.
guys think with this amount of money being given and seems to be increasing every year, do you think money can buy you a championship?
I feel like in that case, there's certain circumstances that I feel like it can. So like in this day and age, the way money's moving and the way players are with how many like older players that we have, money can buy you a championship because if a team has a good amount of money and they're like, you know what, let me grab these 3 all-star players, have them teach these lesser like non-all-star players.
Role players.
Yeah, and throw them in, get that chemistry and then dominate. But and win championships and whatever. But at the same time, teams that don't have that much money, I feel like it's not fair to them because there's people that are going and getting on the low, like the worst teams, this, that, because they don't have not necessarily the experience, but some teams don't have enough to go buy LeBron James or stuff like that. And
Right.
I feel like it's not fair because most of the people just go there because they love playing the sport. Yeah, money's a
Mm-hmm.
part of it. Money's great, money's cool, but everyone's going there to I you don't do a job that you don't like. And I
Right.
feel like if you don't like basketball, then why are you playing it?
Right.
And why are you there playing it? I mean, yeah, the money's good, but I feel like if you're making money off of that, your focus could be put so much better if you're not liking the sport.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, how do you feel about super teams and can money win you a championship?
For sake of time, I'm gonna probably keep my point of view short, but I think me personally, I don't think that money can really buy a championship in this sense. I'm thinking about like more than just money, how we kind of brought up a little bit. Like you have a chemistry that you kind of have to make with a team, and throwing all these star players and it isn't just gonna make a superstar team. Like yes, you're gonna have these great players who can make moves, but again, like we had talked about earlier, like these teams all perform different ways, and you put players from different teams together, they're all going to have different ways that they like to play. So if you don't have that kind of chemistry, like you can spend all the money in the world you want, you can have the biggest franchise and you can have the best players, but you're not going to go anywhere if they can't work together. I think there's a huge risk that comes with buying the championship. Me personally, I don't really feel like that's something that you can just buy. I think that's something you have to grow. I know obviously money's involved with it, and that includes getting players like Jose has said, kind of like growing the players, teaching them and teaching the other ones. But when it just like from the base point of view, I don't think you can just buy a championship.
What is your
Um,
opinion?
what'd you say?
What is your opinion on all this?
I think I'm on the opposite side of them. I think if you're in the general, if you're the general manager, if you're in the front office of a team and you know your team very well and are very confident about what season your team is in, then I think money can buy an NBA championship. I think a perfect example of this, in my opinion, is the Milwaukee Bucks championship run in 2022. They were very confident about where they were as a team. They had built up Giannis to be the superstar franchise cornerstone. They had built up his Robin, the Robin to his Batman, and Chris Middleton. They had all these guys that they had drafted and built up, and they strongly believed that they were a piece away from winning a championship. And I remember at this time too, there was a lot of rumors of like Giannis might be unhappy, he might be looking for a new team, but because they knew what spot their team was at, they truly believed that they were one piece away from making that championship run. So they did what they did. They made a trade for Drew Holiday, one of the better defenders and guards in the league. They bought their super team with him being the final piece, and they made the championship run that they thought they could make. So I think you can make the same argument with the Golden State Warriors and Kevin Durant coming off that loss to the Cavaliers. But I think if you're just smart about it and you're very well versed and well knowledgeable about the current state of your team, I think if you're smart about it, then yes, money can buy you an NBA championship.
Me personally, I honestly feel like there's more risks to bringing three All Stars and being like, okay, hey, make this happen, rather than doing it the traditional way where you have a couple stints of years where you play bad, but you also get higher draft picks, kind of like the Celtics did. We drafted Jalen Brown in 2016, Jason Tatum 2017, and then we also drafted a big man of Robert Williams. And now we are one of the faces and best contenders to win this championship. Just last year, we made a championship run, even though it wasn't what we, you know, wanted to in the end result. But I feel like it's better for you to go the traditional route where you draft players and just essentially just take that risk. Because, for example, the Brooklyn Nets, uh, just a couple seasons ago, they had signed KD offseason one year and Kyrie, and then all of a sudden signed James Harden. And, these guys are big bucket getters, individually, but once you put them together, it's like they're all ball hungry and want the ball in their hands. And for all three of them to mesh, and because your salary cap is majority of their payroll, you can't get good role players. So just what happened last season to them, they got swept 4-0 first round. But yeah,
Oh,
I think that concludes today's podcast. Thank you very much for all the viewers who are watching. Thank you. And this has been me, Fernando, Devin, Austin, Jose. You guys have a great day.